Good evening, guys. Hope everyone's doing well. Just bear with me for 2 seconds. I'm just to this on my social media so we can get some people to join us. Bear with me for 2 ticks. Right, we are live. It's Saturday night. It's just after Gavin McDonnell versus Ray Vargas. I know Ryan Burnett is still to fight, but to be honest, he's in against a journeyman with a losing record. I don't really understand why Ryan Burnett is even in this fight. He's coming off a win against Ryan Farag. Maybe it's just a keep busy fight, but you know, Ryan Burnett is not a guy who's really impressed me in his career to date. Eddie Hearn keeps talking about him fighting for a world championship, and now he's fighting a guy who's got a losing record. So if I'm honest, I wanted to come on. I'm a bit tired. I wanted to come on. I wanted to do this live show. I wanted to react to Gavin McDonnell versus Ray Vargas and some of the undercard fights rather than necessarily sit and watch the Ryan Burnett fight. Let's start by saying Gavin McDonnell joins a rather unfortunate club, which is Brits who I haven't been a fan of, going and fighting for a world title, losing, but making me a fan in the process. So included in that club right now, we've got guys like Martin Murray, we've got guys like Paul Smith, we've got guys like Stephen Smith, and now Gavin McDonnell. You know, Gavin McDonnell's always been a fighter who I haven't looked forward to seeing his fights. He's always been a fighter who I thought is slightly dull in the ring. But he showed a lot of attributes tonight. He showed a lot of heart. He showed a huge will to win, a huge engine, a huge gas tank, and he really, really didn't disgrace himself against Ray Vargas, who proved to me tonight that he's an elite level operator. Vargas looked like he had a lot of talent, a lot of skill, and a hell of a lot of attributes in there. We're going to have to start by addressing the scoring. My old mate Ian John Lewis, friend of the channel, I've got to say, possibly not his finest night tonight, in my opinion. Ian John Lewis scored the fight a draw. I'm afraid I cannot, in a month of Sundays, see how this fight was scored a draw. I scored the fight 8 rounds to 4 to Ray Vargas. But that was being incredibly charitable to Gavin McDonnell. And I think if I watched it back, I'd probably be inclined to say it was either 10-2 or 9-3. Perhaps because of the Doncaster crowd, the Hull crowd, perhaps because of the fact that I was scoring it, bearing in mind that there may be controversial judging, I gave Gavin McDonnell 4 rounds. But I was aware that in at least 2 of those rounds, I was being extremely charitable. So I really think that 9 rounds to 3 or 10 rounds to 2 would have been a fair result. But I see absolutely no cause to even debate giving Gavin McDonnell 5 rounds. There weren't 5 rounds in the fight that Gavin McDonnell plausibly could have won. So how Ian John Lewis scored him 6 rounds and scored the fight a draw, I've got to be honest and say I really, really don't know. I really, really don't know. You know, 118, 110, 117, 111, 116, 112. I can accept all of those scores, but 114, 114 is frankly ludicrous. And look, it's not a robbery. Vargas has rightly won the belt, but it's yet another black mark against fighters coming over and fighting for titles in the UK. Jorge Linares versus Anthony Crolla is a similar example where the right man won, but the scoring was so dodgy. You know, it just creates further doubt about people wanting to come over and fight here. And, you know, for me, Ray Vargas won this fight in a competitive but very, very, very clear fashion. So anyway, we've talked about the scoring there. I'll go to the chat in just a second. Plan for tonight's show, we're going to start by discussing Gavin McDonnell versus Ray Vargas. I'm going to have a bit of a chat about it in the chat and get some comments from them and put them live on air. Then we're going to discuss a few of the undercard fights. We're going to be discussing my old mate and friend of the channel, Dave Allen, who won in 30 seconds by a knockout. We're going to be discussing Tommy Coyle, who won by knockout over Rakeem Noble. And we're going to be discussing Luke Campbell, who won by early stoppage against Jairo Lopez. So let's start by delving into the chat before I really get into breaking down Gavin McDonnell versus Ray Vargas. So shout out to a few people in the chat: Mabel, Matt, Chris, Lee, TTPP, YouTube, Michael, Lewis, the Wizard, same, Modern Broadcast, JG, Bruce, Chris. Chris says, how on earth could one of the judges have it a draw? Unbelievable. Robbie United, Anonymous, YouTube, David. David says, draw, WTF. Stefan says, Ian John Lewis is a disgrace. Oz. Adam Scott. I can see Diobby Anulli's in the chat. Tom O'Brien. Irish Tom is in the chat. Tetley's in the chat. Amir Khan's chin is in the chat. Terry's in the chat. He says, you're not taking into account the 2 spectacular knockdowns. Hello, Jet. Jet's in the chat. Charlie's in the chat. Yeah, Sat's in the chat. Martin's in the chat. So good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining. Thanks for joining me live. We got 70 people watching. Please hit the thumbs up button. Let's get some more people joining live and get some visibility. Boxing Barry says, Gavin put in a top effort. He did. So let me give my breakdown in this fight. Both guys come out. They're both extremely tall, extremely long, extremely rangy guys for the weight class. Gavin McDonnell spent the majority of his career being a taller man in the ring. He's a guy who usually uses his height, his range, and dictates fights from distance, etc. Ray Vargas truly is a beast at this weight class, a massive, massive guy for this weight class. And he actually had a substantial size advantage over Gavin McDonnell, who's usually known as a decently sized operator at this weight class. Ray Vargas comes out. Instantly, you can see there's a lot more snap to his punches. His punches just appear faster. His punches appear harder than McDonnell's. Vargas is putting his punches together nicely. He's throwing combinations well. He's jabbing and moving well. You know, he's got that kind of Mexican style, but with a difference, because he's got the mentality to get into a fight. You can see him clearly wanting a scrap. He's waving the guys in. You know, he's putting his hands up and waving them in, and, you know, asking for McDonnell to have a fight. But at the same time, he's using his jab, he's using distance, he's boxing from range, etc. So very, very, very impressed in the early rounds. And I think instantaneously, I'm giving Vargas the first 2 or 3 rounds in order to, you know, establish something of an advantage from range. McDonnell, after 3 rounds, decided to change up his game plan. McDonnell decided to try and walk Vargas down and try and bring the fight up close and, you know, get involved in a bit of a scrap in the pocket and try and bring Vargas into a brawl. He adopted a kind of presser fighter style mentality and presser fighter approach. The difficulty for me is Gavin McDonnell truly has none of the attributes to make a presser fighter. He was slow on his, he wasn't slow on his feet, sorry, but he was lacking in the crisp work. He was lacking in the ability to cut down the ring. That's what I was trying to get out when I was saying slow on his feet. He didn't have anything like the power to put Vargas back in his box. And even though you saw McDonnell try and switch it up and try and adopt the presser from as early as the 4th and 5th rounds, really it was not till well into the second half of the fight that McDonnell started to get any success at all, really, because Vargas just had far superior boxing pedigree, and he was picking McDonnell off and landing a hell of a lot of nice shots on McDonnell as McDonnell was trying to bring the presser and come in. Towards the second half of the fight, McDonnell showed true engine and true grit, and he kept coming. He was relentless in his come forward approach. Perhaps Vargas started to tire, and that's no criticism of Vargas. I guess anyone would start to tire given the pace the fight was fought at. But, you know, with 3 or 4 rounds left, I thought Vargas became slightly lower volume. Maybe a little bit of the snap came out of his work, and you could start to give more and more rounds in favour of Gavin McDonnell. You know, you can make a case that Gavin McDonnell won 2 or 3 of the last 5 rounds or so. But really, what happened here is McDonnell's A game to box in the early rounds didn't work at all. And his B game to put the pressure on only started to work right at the end of the fight when Vargas was getting tired. That's kind of the way that I take it. For my money, for my money here, I'm going to give McDonnell a bit of credit for bringing some versatility to the ring. You know, he had a plan B. He mixed it up, he changed it up, and I'm going to give him some credit for that. You know, I was impressed, and he fought in a way that was unnatural to him. It was obvious he was going to have to stop doing what he was doing. So credit to him for bringing something different and, you know, showing the determination he did. But he just doesn't have the skill set of an elite level presser fighter. And because he didn't have the attributes to win in the fight the normal way that he wins fights, you know, he had to revert to that tactic. So, yeah, as I say, McDonnell's made a fan of me tonight. He caught Vargas with some good shots in the end, but fundamentally just lacked the power. And for me, Vargas looked like a really, really world-class operator. You know, I don't know in depth the guys in the super bantamweight division. I know there's some big names in there. I know there's Rigondeaux, Magdaleno, Donaire, etc. But Vargas, you know, looked like an elite level fighter. He was light on his feet. He moved very well. He pivoted very nicely. The way he doubled and tripled up his jab was effective at points. He had good hand speed. He put punches together nicely. You know, I thought he was a really, really decent fighter in there. And I think McDonnell showed that he's a European level operator, but for me, Ray Vargas proved tonight that he was a world level operator. So I was very, very impressed by his performance. Let's go to the chat. So let's discuss this fight. Let's discuss Ray Vargas versus Gavin McDonnell. How did you guys score the fight? How impressed were you by Ray Vargas? You know, what did you make of Gavin McDonnell's performance? So I'm going to delve into the chat now and see what people are saying on that, and, you know, see how people rated the fight. Let's get some of your comments live on the channel, and then we'll move on to some of the undercard fights. Luke Campbell, Dave Allen, Tommy Coyle, etc. D. Obianulli didn't rate Vargas. He says he's no way elite. We'll have to agree to disagree there. I thought he showed a lot of skills. Cameron says Gavin McDonnell is Euro level at best. The Wizard had it 118-110 Vargas. Anonymous had it 9-3 Vargas. Louis had it 9-3 Vargas. Charlie says he gave the first 7 to Vargas, but Gav came back into it, left it too late. Cameron says Vargas isn't elite, but he's above McDonnell. Ooh, getting behind in the chat now. Will had it 117-111 Vargas, as did Ketley. YouTube had it 116-112. Dean says, am I going live next week after Havey Bellew? I'm not sure if I am, actually, because I might be with people that night. Matt has it 118-110 Vargas. Adam says 8-4 and 9-3. Modern Broadcast was a bit closer. He said 115-113 Vargas. It was a close fight. Vargas didn't land in the second half. I personally can't see 5 rounds to give to Vargas, but there you go. David Mustard said Vargas round the whole fight. It's boxing. Cameron said 8 to Vargas. Will says anyone that scored that a draw needs their head chested. Brian said the British judge should be investigated. Stefan had it 119-109. Vargas very good off the front and back foot and awkward. McDonnell was outclassed. Charlie said Vargas proved he was elite level. Sat says 8 or 9 rounds to Vargas. Upton's got it 10-2. Anonymous says Vargas definitely elite. Bruce Wayne's got it 11-1. Said McDonnell was highly ineffective. Callum said Ian John Lewis should be banned. Jet's got it 8-4 Vargas, but he says Magdaleno beats him. Anonymous says BG, you watching Wilder, Washington or Brazil? Izu? Not tonight, but I'll watch it in the morning and do a video tomorrow morning. Titus has Vargas by 6. Les has it 8-4 Vargas. Jack has it 9-3 Vargas. Iris has it 10-2 Vargas. Christian has it 4 rounds to Vargas. Vargas. Henry 8-4 Vargas. Lee says the difference between Vargas and McDonnell was clear. Mix Master says this is a terrible time for Dave Coyle. Well, yeah, can't disagree there. Price is lost. Bellew's going to lose next week. McDonnell's just lost. Niall says Vargas was a different class. Will says, if this had been a draw, it'd be so damaging for boxing and a major blow to British boxing, bringing fighters over here. Busy Beast is 9-3 Vargas. Stefan says, no way is Vargas elite. There's a difference between world level and elite level. Loba and Crawford are elite. Okay, fair point. I guess it's what terminology you prefer, but he's certainly world level. David says the draw was an embarrassment. Tetley says he's really liking his post-fight vids. Great way to finish up. Cheers, mate. Same edit, 9-3 Vargas. Evening, Mikey. There we go. Okay, so we got 95 people watching live. Shout out to everyone who's joined us. We've just been discussing the McDonnell versus Vargas fight. So there you go. Lots of boxing fans in the chat. Del Boy had it 11-1 Vargas. So I think a general consensus between the guys on my channel is something like 9-3. You know, there's some people who have it as wide as 11-1. There's some people who have it as close as 7-5. Anywhere between 10-2 and 8-4 seems to be the consensus. You know, that seems to be 90% of the scores falling within that bracket, 10-2 to 8-4. You know, Howie and John Lewis had it a draw. Pretty out there scoring for my money. But there you go. I thought, as I say, Gavin McDonnell, he's one of these guys. I remember thinking this after Stephen Smith's last loss. You know, I've never really sat down and wanted to watch the Stephen Smith fight, but I'll happily watch him again after seeing those two fights that he was in previously against the world champions, Sosa and Pedraza. And I kind of feel the same after seeing Gavin McDonnell tonight. He made a fan of me tonight. I think he showed a huge amount of grit. He just didn't have the style, and he didn't have the power, and he probably didn't have the class either of Ray Vargas. But I personally thought Ray Vargas very, very good in there. Anyway, let's move it on. I think that's, for the time being, all I've got to say on Gavin McDonnell versus Ray Vargas. Let's talk about Dave Allen. Dave Allen fought on the undercard tonight. It wasn't televised live on Sky. I think they showed the replay of it at some point during the bill, based on the fact that some of the earlier fights ended quicker than expected, so they replayed Dave Allen's fight. But Dave Allen fought Lukas Ruziewicz, who is 22 wins and 28 losses, and Dave Allen won by stoppage in 30 seconds. So Dave, if you're watching this when it goes up, congratulations to you. Really, really good to see you back in action, back in the win column, and getting a knockout. This opponent, he'd actually been in, look, clearly he's a guy with a losing record. He's a guy from the weight class below. I'm not going to make out he's a world beater. He'd actually been in with very good fighters. He fought Rakeem Chakaev twice. He fought Ola Falabi. He fought Izu Gonu. He'd mixed it up at a decent level, admittedly earlier on in his career. And he's clearly someone who's turning up, and I saw people were using him to debut their prospects against him now. So clearly, not a top level fighter or even a top 500 level fighter. But fair play to Dave Allen. Being super critical, I still thought Dave Allen looked quite heavy in there. Probably in better shape than he was for the Ortiz fight. Still thought he looked a bit heavy, but it was good to see him actually throwing punches. And I know it was only a 30-second fight and it was against a far lower level opponent, but it was good to see Dave Allen coming out and being aggressive and not just being in sparring partner mentality. Even when I've seen him fight journeymen before, he's been quite, he's not been the most naturally aggressive heavyweight, let's put it that way. And, I was really pleased to see him come out and look to throw punches with bad intentions. And, he hurt the guy early and had the killer instinct to get him out of there. And you could see what it meant to Dave Allen. He was a popular figure amongst the crowd. I was watching it on Facebook Live. You could see that he was a popular figure on Facebook Live. And, he's a guy who's making a name for himself in the sport of boxing. And I certainly like to see that. And, got a lot of time for Dave Allen. I'll try and get him back on the channel in the oncoming weeks to talk about this fight and to talk about his training and where he's going to look to go from there. Personally, I do think he needs to get a proper trainer. I know he does a little bit of pads with his dad and a little bit of pads with his manager, etc. I think you know, in order to really mix it up and get to English British title level, he's going to need a full-time trainer, and that's part of being really, really dedicated to the sport. Eddie Hearn said in a post-fight interview, a strength and conditioning coach. I actually very much agree with Eddie Hearn. I think Dave Allen would really, really benefit from that. But I'm really pleased to see him back in the win column, and you know, he deserves a fight like he got tonight, with an opponent like he got tonight. So pleased for him in that sense. Let me know your thoughts on Dave Allen in the chat, people. Let me know your thoughts on this fight, who you want to see him fight next, and you know what level you think he can operate at. Because I know there's a few of us Dave Allen fans in the YouTube boxing community, if you like. So let's let's get behind Dave Allen, and hopefully he's going to get some big fights and some winnable fights. And I do believe, if handled correctly, he probably can be taken to British title level, but maybe he needs some of those learning fights. Mikey wants Allen to rejoin Peter Fury. Charlie says Allen needs one more fight before facing the likes of Ian Lewison. I agree. Tetley says Allen never looks in shape. Yeah, I think part of that's that he needs a trainer and a strength and conditioning coach. Anonymous says Allen versus Hammer would be a great fight, or maybe Dimitrenko. Both winnable for Allen. Yeah, I think those are both winnable fights for Allen, but I'd like to see him fighting at the level, a lower level for the next fight or two, give him a bit of experience. Lewis says I want Allen to fight Lewison. Dean says Dave Allen can beat Price. I'm getting behind here in the chat. Del Boy says for Allen, why not someone like Tom Little next? Very possibly. Cameron says Allen should be trained by Adam Booth and take on Ian Lewison next. Then the winner should fight Sexton and Cornish winner. Stefan says Dave Allen can hopefully get to British level. David said he looked chubby. Tetley says give Allen Price if he's still fighting. Matt says he's a top bloke. Titus says Allen could get a world title payday if he's brought along properly. Chris Ariola says Allen versus Briggs, let's do it. Mr. Boxing Today says Allen versus Webb. Yeah, I think Webb's got a fight against Dorian Darts. We'll see if he comes through that, but potentially. Jamie says Allen needs to fight a guy of the same level he just did, but try not to see the KO so quickly. Let him try and pick apart an opponent. I agree, Jamie. I think that's a good comment. Charlie says Darts would be an ideal opponent as a warm-up before the British. Good shout, Charlie. Matt says, am I staying up for the Wilder fight? I'm not tonight, no. I'm going to watch it in the morning, and I'll post a video in the morning. Del Boy says Darts is a good shout. Modern Broadcast says Marius Watt versus Dave Allen. Too early for my money, Modern Broadcast. DLB and Elise says Allen versus Big Baby Miller. Definitely not for my money, no. I want to see Allen brought along slowly. I want to see Allen... You know, he's 24 years old. That's a baby for a heavyweight. I want to see him get the kind of opponents that a 12-fight novice or a 13-fight novice should be getting at this stage of his career. I still believe Allen's 2 or 3 fights away for getting a British title fight. I think someone of a similar level tonight, maybe another respected journeyman. Mikey says Julius Long, maybe someone like that. Then an Ian Lewison, then the Sexton Cornish winner, perhaps something like that. Del Boy says Fred Cassie. Not at this stage for me, Fred Cassie. I think Fred Cassie's a level above the type of opponent I'd be picking right now. Cameron says, does BG have an Instagram? I don't. Never understood Instagram. Callum says, Allen could have been a decent contender. Sticking him in with White and Ortiz has ruined his career, turned him into an opponent. Let's see, Callum. You could be right, but I suspect that there's going to be some investment behind Allen. You know, he's becoming a more popular figure, and Eddie Hearn says he wants to make him a project. So maybe it'll be the making of himself. Boxing Barry says Allen owes it to himself to knuckle down and give it a go. Agree. There we go. Right. Anyway, we'll move it on. Let's talk Tommy Coyle versus Rakeem Noble. I gave the first round of this fight to Rakeem Noble. Coyle was a bit ring rusty. You know, Rakeem Noble, he looked quite odd in there, didn't he? He looked like a very, very unorthodox fighter. I don't know if I was the only one thinking this, but He won the first round on my card, but I personally thought when he punched, he looked like he was pushing out his punches in treacle. Everything was so laboured. Everything was so forced. The punches, I'm sure he hits harder than he looks, than the punches look. But the punches just looked so pitter-patter. It really looked like he was forcing them out, and they didn't look like they were landing with any snap at all. But his work from range was decent. He was very, very tall, and it was immediately obvious that he was quite an upright target with his head on a pole waiting to have his chin tested. Tommy Coyle, for me, is a guy who I view, and I've always viewed, as an overrated fighter. But, towards the second round, Tommy Coyle started bringing the pressure, and his timing started to become more and more in tune. And you could see Rakeem Noble didn't like it when Tommy Coyle got up close inside the pocket and was able to push him back into the ropes and get to work. And because there was a big height difference between the two guys, and because Tommy Coyle was coming in low and Rakeem Noble's head was straight up in the air with his chin dangling out, it made him very, very susceptible to like an overhand right, almost like a sort of UFC style punch, one of those type punches. And that literally is what was Coyle's effective weapon, and what won him the fight tonight against Rakeem Noble. Essentially getting low against a tall opponent with no upper body movement and no head movement, with his chin up in the air, allowed him to create the gap and create the angle to land the overhand right. And once it started landing, and once the pressure started building, Rakeem Noble was hurt and was faded and was stopped, in pretty definitive fashion, I've got to say. Rakeem Noble looked very, very green in there for me. You could see he was a guy with some attributes. He was very unorthodox, and he didn't look like a natural fighter in there, but you could tell he did certain things well, but he looked very, very, very green. And he didn't look like a guy with proper defensive awareness, and he didn't look the most sort of naturally ring savvy and astute. Tommy Coyle's experience and the way Tommy Coyle approached this fight made it very, very easy work for him. I still believe that Tommy Coyle fundamentally is a bit of a shot fighter. I still think he's going to struggle stepping up to British level. I think the division he's now campaigning at light welterweight, he's constantly going to come up against taller guys, and I think there's a lot of class in that division, even domestically. And I do believe Tommy Coyle, is going to struggle to put a decent run of wins together. But his experience and style found the key to a victory tonight, and I've got to give him credit. He performed very nicely against Rakeem Noble. So let me know your thoughts on that fight, guys. Who do you think won? I guess it was a fairly definitive victory that we can't necessarily argue over. But I mean, what did you make of it? What did you make of Tommy Coyle's performance? Did you think he looked good? Do you think he's got the potential to go to British level, etc.? And what did you make of Rakeem Noble? A lot of talk afterwards that Frankie Gavin would potentially be fighting Tommy Coyle next. And if Frankie Gavin can make 140 pounds off the years of being overweight, then I believe Frankie Gavin probably takes Tommy Coyle to school, if I'm honest. I think Coyle really lacks the size, and although he won by knockout tonight, I don't think he's a real puncher. And I think that's going to be problematic for him because he's not big, he doesn't hit hard, and I don't think he's technically overwhelmingly good. So I think he's probably going to have to adopt that pressure fighter type mentality in these kind of matchups. And, we saw that against Tyrone Nurse, a genuine British to Euro level fighter, that wasn't enough to get the win. Daniel says he's a small guy for a lightweight. Maybe go back to lightweight and fight Cardle. Charlie says, who do you fancy in Coyle versus Gavin, BG? Gavin. Obi Anuli says Coyle looked the goods before he got KO'd by Derry. Since then, he's been a face-first fighter. Mikey's a fan of Tyrone Nurse. Chris Ariola says Coyle's garbage. Tetley's picking Gavin over Coyle. Motor Edit says Gavin won't make 140. Obianulli says Gavin has no cardio. The Wizard isn't a Tommy Coyle fan. Noble was like, what's in Flintoff box? Callum says Rod Salker versus Tommy Coyle. Let's do it. Mikey says Coyle's got okay power in his opinion. It's not concussive, but he can hurt guys. Amir Khan's Chin says if Gavin can make 140, he's far too good for Tommy. Lee says Coyle only looked good because the opposition tonight was disappointed with Noble. I was disappointed by Noble, and I think that's the correct comment from Lee. Matt says Ian Lewison's just called out Dave Allen. Stefan says Tommy Coyle is very entertaining for his limitations, real fan-friendly fighter for the undercards. Yeah, I think we're kind of all in agreement. Charlie says Coyle versus Robbie Davis Jr. would be a good fight. That is a plausible fight. Mikey wants to know who would win, Crawford or Coyle. I think Crawford gets stopped by a similar overhand right to the one Rakeem Noble ate tonight. Cameron says, BG, have you seen much of Josh Lever? I haven't, mate. Obianulli says he was expecting a real good fighter in Noble. He was disappointed. Yeah, Noble, I think a lot of us were expecting a good fighter in Noble. He promised a lot, didn't he? But didn't really deliver. Looked very, very green and very raw in there. Hard to understand how he's had some success. And, you know, he's beaten that K Prospere, or however you pronounce it, who was deemed a real hot prospect. Graham says he's been boxing as a novice for 3 months and could see Coyle's opponent was completely out of his depth straight away. Cophen says Warren had the better card this weekend. Well, he did have a fight of the year contender on it. To be fair, McDonnell versus Vargas was actually a decent scrap for the second half of the fight. But yeah, Amir Khan's Chin says Crawford might vacate if Coyle becomes mandatory. No Agogo news will, I'm afraid. Charlie says Gavin versus Coyle will be a war. Mikey says Tyrone Nurse, Robbie Davis Jr., Ahara Davies and Gavin. Who wins that 140 tournament? For me, Ahara Davies is the pick of those four. Daniel says, saw an old video of Noble, thought he would have improved massively since, but he looked exactly the same. Okay, let's keep it rolling, guys. Got 93 people watching live, so if you're one of those people with us live now, please hit the thumbs up button and subscribe to the channel if you are. Let's move it on and let's talk Luke Campbell versus Jairo Lopez. Weird fight this. Luke Campbell won by stoppage in the second round. Campbell's timing looked good tonight. His timing looked really, really good, and he looked like he was hitting with power. There was real punching power behind his work tonight. I've always thought that loss he suffered against even Mendy was due to not making the weight correctly. I know he had various issues outside of the ring with family and health problems, etc. But I was at the weigh-in that day, and I spoke to him after the weigh-in. I think he was in a terrible state. I saw him literally gasping down water. So I suspect the reason he folded so tamely against Mendy and the reason his punch resistance was poor and he succumbed to that presser fighter style, number one was because Mendy was a big, strong guy with lots of experience. But number two was because, really, he didn't make the weight properly. He was dehydrated the day before and he hadn't fully recovered for the night of the fight. But Campbell on his day is a classy boxer. He is. I thought he was slightly messy at times tonight, which is maybe being overcritical, but I didn't think he finished clinically. I thought his timing when catching his opponent from range was very good. I thought his power was good, but maybe he was a little bit overeager to get the stoppage. And I didn't think he was the most clinical finisher in there, but overall it was a good performance from Campbell. And Eddie Hearn said after the fight, they're going to look to make that even Mendy fight again next time out. I suspect Campbell can reverse the form there and get revenge in a rematch with even Mendy. I'd pick Campbell to beat Mendy next time. If you're watching in the chat, let me know. Who would you pick in a rematch between even Mendy and Campbell? I actually think Campbell does have the potential to be a decent fighter. I certainly pick him over Scott Cardle if they fight for the British belt at any time. I'd probably lean to him over Cruller. I think Campbell's size, he'd have a size advantage. He's a southpaw. I think he'd have a power advantage. I think he'd have a time advantage. He's always going to be vulnerable to a presser fighter, Crawler, like we saw in that Mendy fight. And if Crawler could bring the presser like he did in that Barroso fight, for example, then it is a dangerous fight for Campbell. Crawler's got a lot of experience at a high level now, and Crawler's proved that he's an underrated fighter time and time again. But I think Campbell does have a high upside. I still question whether he's got a chin and durability and punch resistance for the top level. But he looked fairly good tonight. Let's go into the chat. Charlie Cutting has Campbell over Mendy. Mikey has Crawler over Campbell. Lewis says Campbell beats Mendy. Will says still think Mendy wins. He doesn't rate Campbell. Moto Edit says Campbell gets revenge. Zaid says Campbell UD. Mikey says Campbell UD's Mendy. Stefan says he thinks Mendy. Del Boy says Mendy. Zaid says, how about Campbell Flanagan? Tetley says Scott Coddle's terrible. Graham says, can't read much into Campbell's performance tonight. Level of opponent was terrible. He did show class. Mikey says Campbell would swat Coddle like a fly. Del Boy doesn't rate Campbell. Stefan thinks Flanagan would win. Will would love to see Crawler Campbell. Christian says he sees Crawler being in Campbell's face and winning. Lee says every punch Campbell threw tonight was spot on. He'll beat Mendy in the rematch. Whether he can be world class remains to be seen against the elite. David says Campbell could do it. Charlie says I'd rather see Campbell go for the Euro title against Idlis Tatley. Modern Broadcast wants to see Campbell Cardle. I think Campbell wins that with a bit in hand. James thinks Rubio is the difference for Luke. Sam's picking Mendy. Yeah, I mean, that Mendy rematch, it would be, you know, it's one of them fights. It almost reminds me of when Amir Khan lost to Bradish Prescott. It's one of those fights where, you know, the guy's a solid enough operator, but he's not a world operator. He's not an elite operator. And I'm not necessarily saying Campbell will become an elite operator, but you'd think that some of the stuff he's shown in the ring would make you believe he'd have the beating of Mendy. Mendy possibly looks a slightly cruder fighter than a guy like, you know, Luke Campbell, who's obviously got that Olympic gold medal pedigree. I do believe making the weight was the problem and inexperience was the problem, but I don't know if I'm sure that Campbell's going to have that punch resistance at the top level. I spoke to Ultratech Sports a little bit on Twitter today, and of course Campbell's got some version of minor WBC belt, and the champion in the WBC right now is Mikey Garcia, and with some of the punch resistance Campbell's shown in the past, you'd want to keep him well away from Mikey Garcia, I think. But there you go. Guys, I'll give you, there we go. So those are the fights that I want necessarily to cover in this live fight, but we can keep it rolling for a little bit. Give me your thoughts on the bill in general tonight. Did you enjoy the fight night? Whose bill was better? Frank Warren's bill last night, Boy Jones Jr., Poxton, and the Commonwealth title fight, or the bill tonight? And, you know, which fight did you enjoy the most over the weekend, and, you know, et cetera, et cetera. Let me know your thoughts, people. Campbell Mendy was a SP. I'm not sure what an SP is. It's not as if he got hammered. Maybe split decision. I think he'll beat Mendy easily. Will says, anyone see Harley Ben? Did Will. Check out the live stream we did last night after the York Hall bill for thoughts on him. Graham says Garcia is the best fighter I've seen lately. Ruben says, have you already discussed Dave Allen? I have, mate. Go back and you'll be able to see it. Stefan says, I disagree. Tetley says Warren's bill was better. Mikey says this bill tops it. It certainly had higher level fights on it. Ruben, probably 15 minutes in, mate. Charlie Cutting says Warren's bill was better. Loves a small hall event. More needs to be broadcast. Totally agree with that comment, Charlie. Good point. Modern Broadcast says Frank smashed it this weekend. Yeah, split decision. Lee says, I actually think Warren's bill was better. Don't say that often. Stefan says Mendy won clearly first time, so there not been a split decision. Jet said, what are your thoughts on the Frank Warren card for last night? Yeah, not bad. Not bad. I did a video after it. I thought it was a good card. Boy Jones Jr. Poxton was good. Do you want to jump on, Jet? Let me know if you want to jump on. Probably only going to do another 10, 15 minutes or so, but be good to get you on if you fancy it, mate. Stefan says Dave Allen's opponent lasted longer than Lesnar did versus Goldberg. Mikey says thoughts on Kyle Chadwick. Bloody hell, yeah, that was a hard fight to watch, wasn't it? That was pub level boxing. Mason says, what's up, BJ? Evening, Mason. Scooby-Doo says, Boy Jones Jr. fights Morden Eggington. Jet's going to jump on. Jet, what I'm going to do is I'm going to email you the Hangout link, mate. Let's get you on. Bear with me, people. I'm just sending Jet a quick email. Right, Jet, that's gone out to you, mate. So check your email and log on, and we can have a bit of a catch up on some of the boxing. Let me just check my phone. Right. Mason says, hope you're well. Cheers for the shout out the other day. No problem. Thanks for tuning in, Mason. Lewis says, get Irish Tom on as well. I haven't seen Irish. He was in the chat earlier, but Rob says, what's up, Tom? Evening, Rob. Hope you're doing well, mate. Thanks for tuning in. Let's have a look. Just seeing if Jet's managed to get on yet. He's not on. I'm just keeping a close eye on this because I've got a habit of leaving Jet waiting for 20 minutes before bringing him in. So I want to make sure I clock him when he come on. James says, I think Ian John Lewis had a shocker, stopping a fight too early, and 114 for the main event. Yeah, I'm an Ian John Lewis fan because he's a friend of the channel, but I can't defend 114, to be honest. Not a good scorecard for my money. No sign of Jet just yet, so we'll continue looking into the chat while he's logging on. But yeah, some decent boxing. I'm getting asked if I'm staying up for the Wilder Bill. I'm not, I'm afraid. I've got a serious amount of stuff to do tomorrow, so I can't have, I need to get some sleep. But I'll watch it in the morning, definitely. Jet has joined. Evening, Jet.
Hello.
Hello. How's things?
Not so bad. How about you?
Did you watch the whole card tonight, mate?
Not the whole card. I mean, I missed the Dave Allen fight because I came back from football about 8 o'clock. There was a crazy amount of traffic around today for some reason. I think the whole of London was a bit packed due to traffic. So, yeah, I never got home till about 8 o'clock. And I caught the Tommy Coyle fight. I did see the Dave Allen one. They showed it in between. So I saw his kind of KO, standard sort of journeyman type. So at least he gets a win under his belt. So, yeah, I saw from onwards. So, Ryan Burnett just won now. So I just saw that.
Cool. Well, let's start with Tommy Coyle, mate. What did you make of his opponent, Rakeem Noble?
Yeah, well, I was just listening to your live stream, and I have to agree with you, to be honest. Noble was very weird, very awkward, but he was kind of gangly. I mean, he was bigger, obviously, than Coyle, but his punches, he seemed to push them out. He seemed to kind of slap sometimes with his punches. He didn't look methodical, and obviously, I mean, he's a Southern area champion, was he, or something like that?
Yes.
A super lightweight or light welter. So, yeah, I mean, it's a bit weird. I don't know. Coyle's just not really cut out for that weight for me. For 140, I think he's too small. Technically, he's not good enough. And there's other guys, obviously, at the domestic sort of scene Tyrone Nurse, those sort of guys. Obviously, Nurse has already beat him. Those guys are just natural super lightweights. So, Coyle moving up in weight, it might be easier for him to make the weight, but I think he can give a good scrap to someone like Scott Cardle, who does like to get involved in the scrap sometimes, back down at lightweight. Obviously, if he challenges, he can win a version of the British, but, the guys like O'Hara Davis and those sort of guys, they're well ahead of him for me. So, he's in a bit of a catch-22 situation because he says he does struggle sometimes making 135. So, I don't know. It's kind of like John Ryder, isn't it?
I think so. And I think one of the problems is he's having to, at the minute, fight purely like a presser fighter. We've seen that in his fight against Tyrone Nurse. We saw it again tonight. And the problem with that is he's not the hardest puncher. And he's coming up against bigger men and guys who jab and guys who use range. That Rakeem Noble, he looked very, very green. But the success he had in the first round was typical of the kind of success fighters are going to enjoy against Tommy Coyle, I think.
Yeah, as I said, he's kind of stuck in kind of no man's land. He's, halfway between one weight and not really got his foot in sort of the other weight as well. So, I don't know. Obviously, you look at his kind of defeats. I know Derry Matthews was quite early on in his career. And, those sort of guys, Luke Campbell, but they're above British level. Luke Campbell obviously was on the card today. Luke Campbell's by far and beyond, Tommy Coyle's level. So it's just about levels, I think. Obviously, Noble, he's a Southern area champion, and he was catching Coyle with, some random punches as well. So yeah, I mean, it's tough to kind of put Coyle in a category. The one thing you can say about Tommy is that he always gives 110%. You know what you're going to get from him, always in a tear up, and he gives great value for money. So, you can't really fault him for that. At least he's, doing well. Thing.
I was amazed Terry was only 27. He feels
he's been. Yeah, I think from his own admission, he said, "I feel like I've been around for donkey's years," which he probably has. I mean, I remember watching him long time ago when I was very young against Derry Matthews when he got starched. Derry Matthews left hook, and he was actually doing really well in the fight. He was boxing, he was moving a day and an age ago. So yeah, I mean, he's 27. He says he wants to win a British title. If he goes back down to lightweight, I think he can win a British title. I think him versus Scott Cardle was a good fight. And, it's not one that I'd say 110% he's going to win, but it's definitely a more winnable fight than the guys he's fighting up at 140. So just put him in with someone like a Josh Taylor or someone like that. Josh Taylor would, just annihilate him, to be honest. So I think he needs to move back down to lightweight if he can make the weight.
Yeah, I'd certainly watch Coyle Cardle. I'd certainly watch that. And if Luke Campbell's going to fight Mendy, which we'll come on to in a second, then maybe that frees up Cardle to have another defence of his British. And, what do you mean? Coyle Cardle, is that a fight you'd watch?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not, as I said, I quite not like Tommy Coyle. I don't think he's a great boxer or anything like that, but he gives great value for money, great value entertainment. So, I'd like to see him fight. And if he can get a chance, a British title chance against Scott Cardle, I think if he comes forward and he does what he did tonight, but with educated pressure, I think Scott Cardle is a guy who likes to get, involved in the tear up. He does this all fancy head movement, and that's all far fetched, I know, but he is talented to an extent. So it could be a bit of a competitive. Well, it could be a real competitive close fight, 50-50, I'd say. But yeah, I'd like to see the fight if it does. If it's made as a sort of co-feature to Campbell versus someone else, Mendy or whoever it is.
Definitely. So let's talk about Luke Campbell. To be fair to you, Jet, I heard you say several times that you thought this opponent was absolutely terrible and that it would be easy work. So it went kind of as you expected, I guess.
I was actually catching up with the podcast because obviously I wasn't there on Wednesday, and some of the fights you were saying you needed my input on the on the fights. So yeah, no, it's good. I always said Campbell is a sort of a very, very good operator. You know, he just, I don't know if it's his chin or his stamina. I know against Mendy he got knocked down, but for me he wasn't in. You know, it wasn't him in the fight. I know you obviously bring up the story that you were at the weigh-in and he was chugging down about 1.5 litre bottle or something like that, 2 litre bottle, and he was going through them really quickly. So you know, he's obviously linked Jorge Rubio, and you know he's gone outside his comfort zone, and he's been training really hard. Obviously, the guys he's been they're not world level guys. They're not maybe Mendes, but Mendes was very, very low output.
Mm.
The guys he's kind of fighting, they're kind of the standard gatekeeper type guys. Low level gatekeepers. And then you get the high level gatekeepers like Mendy and those sort of guys. So yeah, if you, in a rematch, I'd pick Campbell, but Mendy, you know, Mendy is a big, strong lightweight. He campaigns at 140 as well.
Yeah.
So you know, it's kind of down to him and his team what they want to do. I mean, if a serious version of Luke Campbell comes up and turns up in a rematch against Mendy, I'd pick him. But you know, Mendy is a tough operator. He's not, you know, he's not a joke. So maybe they want to fight him, maybe they don't. Or so maybe his team want to fight him. Eddie Hearn might not want to make the fight, but you know, if it makes financial sense or it makes, you know, like it's an eliminator or something like that, then yeah, go for it. But for me, he's going down the wrong route. I think he's going down a WBC route, as you mentioned earlier. And I think it's career suicide at the moment to kind of face someone like Mikey Garcia, who looks, you know, I think we spoke about it on Twitter earlier. You know, if he went down the IBF route against Robert Easter, I think he could probably beat Robert Easter. Terry Flanagan, I think, you know, he could, maybe in a few fights' time, he'd be ready for someone like Terry. Crawler, I think he can beat. You know, there are guys at the top level I think he could beat. You know, obviously he needs the experience, but it's kind of a waiting game with those kind of, you know, get the big fights for Luke Campbell. I guess he's fighting these nobodies at the moment, and it's not really doing him any better.
Do you see improvements to him under Jorge Rubio? Because I must admit, I thought his timing and power was stronger than it usually looked.
His power, yeah. I mean, obviously the guys he's been knocking over, they're kind of guys he's supposed to be knocking over, if you know what I mean. So to an extent, no, but definitely for me, in the Matthews fight, he looked, you know, crisp. He looked sharp. He looked like, you know, he was giving Derry loads of angles. I know that's a kind of faded version of Derry, but he was doing loads of really, really smart and neat stuff. In this fight, I thought he looked really good. I was talking to my cousin while the fight was on. There was only a couple of rounds, but he said his timing was good. You know, he could have, you know, sharpened up a bit, but on the whole, he was quiet. And I think, obviously, you know, it's dependent on the opponent. I think that the better the opponent gets, I think the more smarter and the more tighter Luke Campbell will be. I think he'll be, you know, he'll be more aware. These guys are kind of not interesting him at the moment. I think he's not really learning anything from these guys. That's just me, you know, making an assumption, but he's got the skills. He's definitely got the skills at lightweight, and he's a big unit at lightweight. Let's put it that way. So you know, just how Ray Vargas is a massive unit at 122 pounds, at 135, Luke Campbell is a massive guy. So he should think, you know, he should pick up a version of the world title.
Yeah. Well, what about a fight I was discussing on? So first off, would you actually you'd pick him to beat Mendy? Would you in a rematch?
Yeah, I'd pick him to beat Mendy. Yeah.
What about if he were to fight Crawler?
I think he'd beat Crawler. I'll be honest. Do you know what? That one's a bit of a, you know, a slightly sketchy one. I mean, Crawler, if he turns up maybe how he did, you know, in the first and second Darlis Perez fights, maybe the Ismael Barroso fight, you give him a good chance in that fight, because with the pressure that's coming back, you know, Luke Campbell is susceptible to a pressure fighter. Whether or not that pressure fighter is Crawler is another question. But for me, I just think everything that Crawler can do Luke Campbell does better. And I think, especially with Crawler face first, he's the battering ram of Joe Gallagher that's going to come forward face first and get hit in the face. And probably that's why Scott Quigg left to go Freddie Roach. But Freddie Roach is no better as well. Just look at Provodnikov. But yeah, I mean, for me, it's just he needs to, I don't know, man. It's I don't know. I haven't really got anything more to say on Campbell. I mean,
What about Flanagan? Let's just throw him into the mix, seeing as I guess he's the other British world champion.
That's a weird one, man. I've been thinking. Do you know what? I'm a weirdo like this. I've been sitting here watching the fight, Luke Campbell versus Lopez, and I'm thinking, could he do this to Terry Flanagan? And I was thinking throughout all the world champions at the weight, and Terry he's not a power puncher. His last few performances kind of flattered his record. Diego Magdaleno knockout, Jose Zepeda knockout. They kind of made it look like he's this monstrous puncher. Don't get me wrong, he's very big at the weight. He's massive at the weight. Weight wise, I heard a rumor that he came in at about 155 for one of the fights, 20 pounds over the limit. Sorry,
Flanagan did.
And that he came in another fight at 160. So I don't know if that's true, but he looks like a quite jacked up, muscular guy. So
wow,
I think Luke Campbell could push him around. Sorry?
Okay, interesting stuff.
Yeah.
What about the main event, Jet? Gavin McDonnell versus Ray Vargas. First and foremost, how did you score it?
Yeah, I think I scored it 8-4. I mean, I was talking to some of the guys on Twitter and yourself, and I seem to be getting a lot of stick for giving McDonnell a few rounds here. And some people had the same scorecard as me, so I thought I didn't score it too badly. It's better than the Ian John Lewis draw, I guess.
Indeed. We've had about 100 people watching, and not one person has given it as a draw. Can you see any argument at all for giving him 6 rounds?
No. I mean, look, do I understand why the draw was given? Yeah, I do. I understand, because McDonnell was holding the center of the ring. He was coming forward. Whether or not he was landing hurtful shots, that's something else. But he looked like he was the boss in there, especially in the second half of the fight. So I do understand why he gave the draw. Whether or not the draw was actually, the correct, that's all for personal interpretation. But for me personally, it was never near a draw. I think Ray Vargas won the fight clear enough. The rounds were, they were good, competitive, especially in the early rounds. Especially in the later rounds. The early rounds kind of Vargas kind of picked them up quite handily. I thought he built up, from around 8-9. I thought he had a massive lead. I thought he was about 6 rounds up or something like that on my scorecard. So it wasn't a bad fight, actually. To be fair, got some criticism obviously for topping the bill, but it wasn't a bad fight at all. Good. I heard you say you're now a fan of what's his face, Gavin now.
Yeah.
Gavin McDonnell, so yeah.
Yeah, and what about Ray Vargas? I thought he looked really, really good in there. What was how impressed were you by Vargas?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't really that impressed. I didn't think he was necessarily. He's world level guy. Obviously, he at that sort of. He looks like a world level operative just from the eye test. Against someone like a Jesse Magdaleno, someone like that, I just think jab. It's a decent jab when he uses it, but he's very wide, like very, very wide. And I think someone who just throws straight down the chute, I think, will catch him every single time. I think, he is very upright. I don't, his head movement is a bit, not there. Very upright target. He doesn't really cut the ring off as well. He had loads of times he had McDonnell kind of cornered at times, and he kind of just backed off, and he let him out. I think Ultra Tech was talking about that as well. So I mean, he's a good fighter. Rate him as an elite sort of fighter. Probably he,
Oh, you're cutting out there, Jet. Try again, mate.
hello?
Hi, we lost you there, mate. Can you still hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah. Okay, just you were saying he's a good fighter, just not so he's an elite fighter.
Oh yeah, so yeah, that's basically it. I mean, he's decent, but you know, not the top. He's not the top of the division for me. Rigo, those sort of guys, I think they beat him at Bantam.
Definitely, yeah. I'd like to see him again after that. He did impress me. I know there's some big names towards the top of that division, so I'd like to see him in the mix with one of them sort of characters, definitely. And what about Gavin McDonnell? Do you think he will drop and become a British champion? Do you think he can potentially campaign at Euro level? What's your take on his future?
Yeah, I mean, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, he can definitely, kind of compete at sort of the below world level, Euro level. I think he'll do well there. He could pick up. He did pick up the EBU, I think, a few
Right.
fights ago. So yeah, he's there or thereabouts. But the guys the thing is, at Super Bantam, there aren't many guys at the top of the division. So he could probably work his way up to another world title. Obviously with Eddie Hearn, he could get another shot, but he could become a world level fighter just because there's not that much. So the division's a bit thin. So yeah, I mean, if he campaigns at Euro level, picks, I assume he probably vacated the EBU. If he goes for that again, he could probably win that, make a couple defenses. He's only had 18 fights, and he's still fresh. He didn't have any amateur career, and he showed a lot of grit, a lot of determination, a lot of heart and spirit. And at times he did show he was a decent enough operator at times. Ray Vargas is a level above him. A level above him, but definitely at times he did show that that he was on a par with him at least. There's obviously stuff he needs to work on in the gym, but he's not he's not a terrible fighter. I just think he's some way off. Someone like his brother Jamie, and I think that's where some of the criticism probably goes to Gavin. So yeah.
I hear you, man. I hear you. No, that makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah, I've got to admit, mate, I'm probably about done. Anything more you want to throw into the mix on any of the action?
Oh no, I never got to see the Frank Warren sort of card yesterday, so
Okay.
I was busy. But the Alado Alvarez, I know he's your boy, and I picked Butte to beat him. But yeah, any quick thoughts on that before you go hop off?
Yeah, definitely, mate. So first and foremost, fight of the year contender last night, Boy Jones Jr. versus Craig Poxton. Highly recommend you and anyone watching live who hasn't seen that takes the opportunity to watch it. One of the most entertaining all-action fights you'll see all year. For me, trumps James DeGale Badu Jack as the current fight of the year at this point. It's only February, so hugely would recommend that. There was also some interesting debuts, some interesting prospects on the card last night. Lerone Richards on the card looked interesting. Harley Ben looked absolutely terrible, but there you go. Irish Tom was in attendance last night, so we'll have to get his full take on proceedings on the podcast on Wednesday. As for Alvarez versus Butte, I haven't actually watched the fight yet, but my good friend Nathan has sent me a copy of the fight, so I'll be watching that, and I don't know if we'll do a standalone video on that or if we'll cover it on the podcast. But did you actually see the fight yet?
I saw bits and pieces of it. I know Butte looked pretty decent on in the lead up to getting KO'd. So yeah, I know he obviously moved up to 175, and it was a final eliminator for the WBC title held by Stevenson. So yeah, well done to Alvarez. I didn't think he was a devastating puncher, but obviously he KO'd Butte, but maybe that's Butte off the peds. So yeah.
That's it, isn't it? I mean, if you look at the form just in its purest form, it's pretty staggeringly impressive form given the trouble Butte caused Badu Jack and James DeGale. But you've got to factor in the performance enhancing drugs factor, haven't you? And that potentially renders the form worthless, which is disappointing. But yeah, Alvarez has always been a guy who's impressed me, so I'm looking forward to checking that one out. It's just so much boxing. There's card last night, card tonight. I'm going to get up tomorrow. I'm meeting some family for lunch tomorrow, and I'm going to get up tomorrow and trying to watch Wilder, Washington, Hurd, Harrison, Izu Ugonu versus Brazil, all of them ones, before lunch. So I don't know when I'll actually get around to watching it, but yeah, I'm looking forward to checking it out. And if we don't do a video, I'll at least make sure I've checked it out before the podcast so we can discuss it then, mate. But yeah, highly recommend you watch the Box Nation card, at least Boy Jones v Poxton. That was a really, really entertaining scrap, mate.
Yeah, we'll do. I will check that for Wednesday, definitely.
Wicked stuff. All right, Jet, thanks for coming along, mate. Appreciate you joining us for a bit there. And we'll chat to you again on Wednesday on the podcast. For everyone watching live, Jet's got his own YouTube channel, Boxing Discussions channel. So hit him up there, hit subscribe on his channel. And yeah, thanks to everyone who's joined me live tonight and who's tuned into this live stream. Massively appreciate it. We've been up to 100 people watching at one point, which is not bad. Thanks to everyone who's hit the thumbs up button. We're on 53 thumbs up, so massively appreciate that. Please also take the chance to subscribe to my channel if you're watching this live, or if it goes up and you catch it later. Anyway, have a good evening, everyone. I'll catch you guys soon.
Take care, all.
Cheers, Jack.